If everyone can find their seats, we're going to start shortly. Thank you. Everyone listens so well. I love it. Welcome to everyone joining us today in person at Pullman, and hello to all the virtual people across the nation joining us as well. My name is Sarah Laird. I am with the Alumni Association. I'm so excited to be here in this wonderful event. Before we get into the question and answer, just a few things I want to share with you regarding the Alumni Association. We have over 46,000 members of our association. And the best thing is we accept all alumni, friends, Cougs. You don't have to be a graduate to join us. We are here for everyone. We partner with the, I'm so sorry. We partnered today with this event. We're so excited to have it. Last quarter, our WSU AA program, Well Read Cougs, voted on a book to read, and they voted on Once I Was You. So once we heard that Maria was announced as this year's Murrow Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, it presented a great opportunity for us to partner with the College of Murrow. So we're so excited to be here. We're so excited to hear from you. We're going to start with recognizing the land we are hosting this event on with a quick video.
Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. There are 37 federally recognized tribes that historically shared their traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington State. Of these, 29 are federally recognized tribes in Washington, with the remaining tribes in Idaho, Montana, and Oregon, some of which represent multiple tribes and bands. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude towards these original and current caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. Washington State University established the Office of Tribal Relations and Native American Programs to guide us in our relationship with tribes and service to Native American students and communities. We also pledge that these relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. As a land-grant institution, we also recognize that the Morrill Act of 1862 established land-grant institutions by providing each state with public and federal lands, which are traced back to the dispossession of indigenous lands. In 1890, Washington State received 90,081 acres of indigenous lands designated to establish Washington State University. Washington State University retains the majority of these lands to this day. We acknowledge that the dispossession of indigenous lands was often taken by coercive and violent acts and the disregard of treaties. For that, we extend our deepest apologies. We owe our deepest gratitude to the Native peoples of this region and maintain our commitment towards reconciliation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure now to introduce the Dean of Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, Bruce Pinkleton.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Bruce Pinkleton. I'm Dean of the College of Communication. Thank you all for being here today. This is an exciting time for us as we kick off our Murrow Symposium. I was thrilled when I learned that Once I Was You was selected for the Alumni Association's book club. It's a terrific book. I finished reading it earlier this year, and we have never kicked off or had a Murrow Symposium event involving a book club before. So this is a new one for us. So we're excited about that and excited to have Maria Hinojosa joining us. And our book club will be hosted by Johanna Bejarano. Johanna Bejarano is a media professional with 15 years of experience in the United States and in Colombia. And she has worked in multiple journalism platforms. I have to say, I listen to her work nearly weekly on Northwest Public Broadcasting, where she broadcasts primarily out of the Yakima area, representing and discussing issues of importance to Hispanic populations and other rural and underserved populations as well. And she does outstanding work. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Johanna. Johanna, thank you so much.
about your book? Once you were,
Once I was you.
well, I was you, but it's once you were me.
Once I was you, once you were me.
Yeah, it's actually that. Maria, when I started reading your book for the first time, it was difficult. I need to be honest about that because it was so intense. It was like a mirror for me. I am an immigrant, I am a woman, I am a journalist, and I am a Latina. But our immigration journeys are different, so and years apart. And for me, it was really, moving. How do you capture so many experiences, different experiences and immigration journeys in the book, the memoir?
Well, I didn't want to write the book. Writing a book is really hard. I had written 2 books previous and they had done just okay. So writing a book to me was not the thing that I was like, oh, let me go write a book. But to be honest with you, when Donald Trump won, it posed such a stark reality. And I remember talking to older folks than me, and they said, during World War II, during the Vietnam War, during crises in our country and in the world, there was extraordinary art that was created because people responded with creativity. And so I just felt like one way that I could respond to a Trump administration, which was more than the administration, just kind of the moment, was to be creative, right? And so that's how the book ended up coming into formation. But it's really, it's hard to write a book. And in this particular case, my editor, Michelle Herrera Mulligan, Irish Mexican from Chicago, doesn't get better than that. She had told me that she wanted me to write a big book. And I was like, no, what do you mean? I want to write a smaller book. And she was like, no, we need you to write a big book. And I didn't understand what that meant. And she said, we need you to take on not only your personal story, but the bigger issues, and how this happened in our country. What's the history? What's the data? And so that's how the book was born. The introduction is a real challenging moment. And I love that you all picked the book. I'm like, this is so adorable. Yes. So happy. So thank you for that. I had already written the whole book. I was done. And for those of you who have ever written a book, it's like when you're done, you're like, oh. And my editor came back and she was like, well, this is great. Book is great. You wrote an extra 100,000 words, but that's okay. I was like, those of us, whenever we have insecurities, we overperform. So I really overperformed. And then she said, there's only one thing that's left. And I was like, what? What now? And she said, you have to write an introduction. And I was like, no, you're kidding me. I don't have anything more to write. Like, there's no more stories to tell. And she, well, you have to write an introduction. And my friend Sandra Cisneros, the great American writer, author of The House on Mango Street and my favorite book, Caramelo. Sandra has been a muse for me. She's been a friend. She's the reason why I wrote the book, because I was so nervous that I asked her if she would read the first chapter. And she said, well, I will, but I'm going to be very brutally honest with you. Can you handle it? And I was like, okay. And when I gave her the first chapter, she was like, you're on your way. She edited, she gave me feedback, but she gave me a blessing. And that really allowed me to write the entire book. So going back to Sandra Cisneros as my muse, when we talk about writing, one of the things that she told me was, as a writer, you don't always have to write about things that you remember. You should try to write about things that you have forgotten, that you wish you could forget, that you wish you could unsee. These things that are really deep in your brain, or that really register as, oh my God, this is quite horrible what I'm witnessing. And that's how the introduction was written. Because I really went back to what's the thing that I really wish I had not seen in my life? And it was that scenario. And my dream, the book has done so well, by the way, thank God. Thank you. Thank you. It's really done phenomenally well. And as a result, I ended up writing a young adult version of the book. And so my dream has always been that that little girl who I saw will somehow get her hands on this book. She's not a little girl anymore. So 2017, 12, how many years is that? It's like what, another 7 years? So she may be 19 now.
But that first story has also a connection with your mom's immigration process. So can you tell us about?
Yeah, so, and that's why for all of you, all of us, unless you are Black, in which case you were, and you are part of the Black American tradition, in which case you were part of what I don't call it slavery, I call it international corporatized government supported human trafficking. That's what I believe slavery was. But other than that, you are drawing your roots back to some form of immigration unless you are part of the indigenous community, right? And so, and in all of those cases, we should want to know, like, what is our story? What is our backstory? How did we get to this point? So I just say that because I think it's great work for all of us. If you're journalists or in whatever way, you know, ask those questions, find out what is your arrival story, as it were, even if you were born here and you never, you know, it's like, what's your story? So my mom had told us at some point when I was writing my first memoir, Raising Raul, she told this story of arriving. It wasn't very much in depth. And something had happened at the immigration checkpoint. We came by plane. We flew from Mexico City to Dallas, Dallas to Chicago, where my father had been hired as a medical doctor researcher in the otolaryngology department. My dad, may he rest in peace, Dr. Raul Hinojosa, helped to create the cochlear implant. That was his dream, and he helped to do that. That's why we end up in Chicago. Dad was in Chicago. Mom is flying on a plane with 4 of us, all under the age of 7. And I'm about a year old, and she's carrying me in her arms when we check into immigration at the Dallas airport, Love Field, actually. That's where I'll stop the story because I'm moving now to 2017. Donald Trump had been elected. He made it very clear, as he has made it very clear, you know, he has said things that that are really inexcusable in relation specifically to, in this particular part of his life, it's really specifically towards immigrants. Earlier in his life, it was towards Black men, because I live in New York, and he asked for the death penalty for 4 young Black men who were all exonerated, as you know, in the Central Park exoneration case. So Donald Trump made it clear what he was going to do in terms of immigration. And he said, the shackles are off. And then the policy became, we are going to take your children. Like, that's the policy, is we will take your children, as a policy that is so horrible that it will make you not want to come, which is really not understanding how immigration people movement, why and how people move. And I know this because I speak to them all the time when I'm doing this reporting. You know, even at that time, soon after, when they were already taking children, and I was on the Mexican side with mothers holding their children and asking, have you heard about the policy in the United States about? And I didn't want to scare them because I don't want to say they're going to take your child. So just kind of, have you heard? And they're like, no. Have you heard that potentially they might try to take your child? No. How could they do that? O sea, the people were, no, they would never do that. Anyway, so the policy had just gone in effect. It was, in that moment, actually a brilliant journalist from ProPublica, whose name, of course, I'm forgetting in this precise moment, had gotten from a whistleblower inside a place where they were caging children. We all remember hearing the sounds of the children crying, and they were being harassed by a Latino man. speaking in Spanish and laughing at them while they were crying for their parents. And it was so heartbreaking. And, you know, that's when we really are so appreciative of our journalists and also of whistleblowers. I'm always looking for whistleblowers. So if you know any, please, please, no, you're laughing, but I'm being very serious. Bruce knows I'm like 100% serious. Like when I'm saying, please find a whistleblower to talk to me, I'm being very serious. They can change history. In this case, my mom hears the sounds of the children crying and she calls me and she is in tears. And when your mom calls you in tears, of course, you're like, what's going on? And she said, no, mijita, es que, you know, I'm just so sad about the mothers and the children. And I was like, I know, Mom, it's terrible. And she was like, no, I really feel like I understand what was happening. I was like, I know, Mom, it's really terrible. I was also trying not to lose it because I was in an airport. And then she said, you're not understanding, mijita. You're not understanding what I'm trying to tell you. I was one of those mothers. And you almost were one of those babies. And I was like, Mom, ¿de qué hablas? What are you talking about? And that's when in her 80s, right? In her 80s, it all clicks. All of it clicks. And she's like, no, it's like what happened is this. The guy said they were going to take you. And I lost my mind. And when I would tell this story before I knew all of this, I was like, my mom was such a feminist. You know, she came to the United States and she was like, I know my rights. And, you know, because there had been some kind of an altercation with the immigration agent that was not clear. But I was like, she was speaking back to an immigration agent. And my mom was a feminist and she knew her American rights even before she was an American. So I saw this moment through a very profoundly feminist owning her voice, and people would applaud like, oh, your mom, she. But what was actually happening was that my mother was in a state of trauma. And when he said, we're going to take her, and he reached out to take me from her arms, and my mom had nothing, you know, she's petite like me. She, you know, she spoke English with a thick accent, but she spoke English and she had the privilege, right? She understood the only thing she had at that moment was her privilege and her voice. And the privilege was what she said, which is, you know, screaming back to this very tall immigration agent, kind of like your size, Bruce, really, really tall. And she was like, you will not take my child. In a very thick Mexican, you will not take my child. I am telling you, you will not take my child. I have a green card. And if you want, you can call the president of the University of Chicago because they had invited my husband, Dr. Raul Hinojosa. You can call the president of the University of Chicago. You know, she's like yelling this out, making a scene, literally losing her mind because it was the only thing. There was no way to fight or flight. It was just her voice. And that's when the agent said, okay, fine, go, just be quiet, get out of here, go. That's my mom's moment of understanding what really happened. And when she's telling me this story, then that was like really trippy when all of a sudden I'm just like, oh my God. And like, and I was really holding it together because I was in an airport, you know, but I was like, oh my God, now I understand exactly why I do what I do.
We are talking here about the emotional weight of different experience that we have as immigrants and, you know, new in the country. In this intersection of segregation and immigration, sometimes it's like a kind of reevaluation of our color of skin and identity to try to fit in this place.
In the United States?
Yeah, in the United States, because I mean, I came here and I start filling forms like, okay, are you a Hispanic? Are you a white? What are you? And I am like, okay, am I brown? What I am, according to this environment.
Yeah. So the notion, and I write a lot about this in the book, and frankly, people were really surprised when I wrote a lot about my imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. People were like, hi, Maria, why are you revealing these things? And I was like, well, because you can't write a half-true memoir. And, you know, either you're spilling your guts or you're not. And the role of the editor is actually to comb through all of that, which is why I love my editor, right? She was really able to see through those 200,000 words, the themes, right? Pick out the clear themes. And one of them was the imposter syndrome. And I write about it because I don't want other people in general, right, especially young women journalists who have my soft spot in my heart, like I don't want them to experience the imposter syndrome. But especially if you are not white, there is this whole like, so wait, what, what's going on here? And by the way, all of us are witnessing, and especially you all in this part of the world where we are here, you're all witnessing this happening in real terms, in real life terms. Okay, what do I mean? I don't know enough about this area, but let me try to talk about North Dakota, which is not Washington State, but maybe some. Anyway, North Dakota has the fastest growing rate of Latino population of any state and grew by the largest percentage over the last decade. It's still a small percentage of the entire state, but it's the fastest growing and it's largest percentage wise. So you might think, well, Latinos are going to go to North Dakota and they're going to bring whatever, let's just stay with this theme, progressive values as an immigrant community. But actually, no. More than likely, what's going to happen is that you will have Latinos in North Dakota who end up voting red. Because that's what they are being surrounded by. And it really is about fitting in. Like, I mean, I talk a lot about how proud I am to stand out, and I do a lot to stand out, like wear really high heels because I'm really small. So, but a lot of it's really about being able to fit in, find a way to feel comfortable. And so it's not surprising that that's going to happen in North Dakota or in Southern Washington or in Mississippi, also that has one of the fastest growing Latino populations in the country. So the question is that what we really want in our country is to do what you did at the opening here. That was really extraordinary. So I'm just telling you, like, I've been to all 50 states plus 2 territories, multiple colleges and universities, I would say in the hundreds. And I've never seen a land statement like that, ever. So however that happened on this campus, and that didn't happen because of just, a benevolent white man like Bruce who just said, let me just write this up. Even though we love Bruce, right?
Yes.
It happened because there was movement here, right? That's the essence of democracy. That's what you want, is you want people owning that voice and saying, okay, we need to be recognized. And it doesn't lessen any of us, which is the argument that we have now in the United States. Like, oh my God, all of those immigrants and refugees are coming and it's going to be terrible for us. And it's like, nope, actually. They're, covering potholes on the Baltimore Bridge at 1:30 in the morning. Or picking apples in Yakima at 3 o'clock in the morning when they'll wake up and take their kids and turn on the headlights of the car so that the whole family can go do a round of picking before the kids go to school, right? So as I just said on MSNBC, where I'm a contributor, you can't have it both ways. So are we lazy and just coming here to take advantage of everything that you're giving us, which is nothing, right? There's no like welcome mat, like here's a check and, no, a house, all of that. Those are all lies. There's not that. Or are we coming to take your jobs? In which case we're not lazy, but we're stealing your jobs. So are we, if you know Baltimore, right? We all know Baltimore. It's a pretty tough city. But the Latino population has doubled in the past, I think it was either 5 or 10 years in Baltimore, doubled. So it's revitalizing communities. So are we revitalizing communities or destroying them? Or we're just, no matter what, we're the problem, which is the other thing that I said, which is, so if we die on the border or we die on a bridge, it doesn't really matter to you. Our lives at this point in this country, in this moment in history where all of us have a responsibility, which is why I'm so thankful that you read my book, right? Because it's all of us. Like in Texas, they're like, should we allow a law to shoot to kill? Yeah, Let's talk about it. Maybe we should just have a law to shoot to kill any immigrant that we see. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? No, there's not two sides to that issue. I'm sorry. So in the world of journalism, no. And I know that my godfather, Edward R. Murrow, because he definitely is my godfather now. You know, I know that he's like saying there is not two sides to that story, Maria. You tell them. And there's no two sides to the caging of children. And there's no two sides to a policy of we are going to take your children, which, by the way, did not start with Donald Trump. To be clear, when the, and I'm gonna say something that's gonna shock you. Please forgive me. Some of you are gonna be a little offended, but work with me for the sake of argument and because of the land recognition that you gave. As you know, many indigenous people will say that the first, to use a term I never used, but specifically now, slur, the first illegal aliens were the Pilgrims. It's like, oh, wait, what? Okay. So they took indigenous children. We know this. They took the children. And then during enslavement, right? They took the children. I don't know of a case documented, but I'm sure that during the time when they were forcibly holding Japanese Americans because they were a threat. No, they weren't. They took some children. So it didn't start right in 2017. And that's why all of us have to, you know, yeah, in the name of Edward R. Murrow. That's what he was trying to say, is that no, there's not always gray. There is in fact black and white. And there are things that we have to stand for, which is why this particular honor means so much to me. And I'm not going to cry, so I didn't.
You have mentioned, Maria, like this kind of hate and love relationship with the immigrants. And I have talked with so many of them, like always feel like an outsider, even if they have been born here in the US. Some kids identify themselves as 200%, for example, like 100% my heritage, Mexican or Colombian or whatever it is, this one, and 100% American. I am curious how different was your path as a young Latina living here in Chicago and your kids' path living as a Latinos in the US?
So here's what my mom told me when I was wanting to be like everybody else. And I was like, I want to go to Disney World. And she said, we go to Mexico every year and you see real magic there. Do you want to go and see fake magic? And I was like, yeah, she's true. It's true. So I grew up with this, like, and we would drive every year from Chicago to Mexico. And so I grew up with this, like, this fascination with what I was experiencing, right? Even though in Chicago, it was very clear that the Mexican community was poor and separate. I was growing up near the university, but we would spend every weekend in the Mexican community, El Barrio Mexicano, as we called it. So I was also not an American citizen. Like, I knew that. I was not an American citizen. I had a green passport. So my identity I was pretty clear, but I was also wanting to be an American girl. That's a lot about what the book is about, right? The pressure to be an American girl. So it was really the politics of the moment, kind of not exactly civil rights because I was too young, but the first Latino to run for office in Chicago, for example, being a part of that. So my Mexican identity was very much a part of my political kind of awakening. And Latin America, what was happening in Chile in 1973 with the murder of the president Salvador Allende, the things that were happening in Mexico that were impacting me. But I also wanted to be an American girl. So, you know, but I wasn't confused. I just always felt like I'm of two places. And like 100% of each. I felt like I wasn't 100% of each. Now with my kids, I love the fact that at one point when I wrote my first memoir, Raising Raúl, and somebody, when I was doing the book tour, they asked the question, what kind of Latino do you want Raúl to be? And I was like, I don't know. Because I knew I wasn't, my husband and I, husband from the Dominican Republic, we were never going to be like, and you're Latino, and you're Latino, and you must speak Spanish, and you have to speak Spanish, and if you don't speak, it's not like that at all. Although, we did give him an interesting name because playing with names. My name was something that I really hated. I hated the name Maria Hinojosa growing up. I wanted to be Susan. So, so with Raúl, his full name is Raúl Ariel Jesús de Todos los Santos Pérez Hinojosa. And it's on his passport, abbreviated, but it really is. And then when he graduated, they said his full name, like, so. But I knew that I was going to let him develop his identity as he saw fit. And he identifies as Dominican Mexican New Yorker, Latino, but if you get specific, you know, Dominican Mexican New Yorker. My daughter identifies as Afro-Indigenous. She's much more kind of clear on that identification. But it's not like their central thing. Because, you know, come on, they have a mom that does a show called Latino USA. Like, seriously? Do you think they're going to want to just be like, yeah, they're like, Mom, you know, but also now they're super proud, and they're both in the business and they both understand this. And they both speak Spanish. They both are attempting to perfect their Spanish. And so, but they are the next generation, right? How will they keep their Spanish? What's that? Because no es fácil eso, no es fácil to keep our Spanish. So people in this country, you know, remember the whole English only movement, right? And it's just like, that's silly. But also, like, we as Latinos who speak Spanish, our concern is that we're going to lose Spanish. And why would we want to lose languages like the indigenous languages that we've lost? Why? When we're like, oh my God, we're mourning the loss of indigenous languages. It's so terrible, which it is. But then everybody's like, but don't speak Spanish. It's like, no, have as many languages as possible, por Dios. And by the way, if anybody's a journalist out there, it makes you easier to hire. What a skill. Plus, I like to tell, and I'll tell you this, that all of that discomfort that you have, that we have about just like, where am I? Like, am I here? Am I from here? Am I from there? Like, that whole conversation in our brain is our superpower. That so many people don't have. Lucky you. You don't have it. But those of us who do often see it as a negative, as a detraction, as something that slows us down. And I'm like, nah, that's our brilliance. That's really, not to say we're better than anybody, that's not, but just like when you feel that, bruh, that's cool. That's like, yes, bask in it, as opposed to, let me shut this off.
I am thinking about being a US citizen, estadounidense, I said.
Yes.
What that really meant to you at the point you get your citizenship? Because there is also like a kind of fear related to that thing. I won't say my experience, but it was like that.
So, so what happened was, it's the 1980s, and I'm a budding journalist, and I'm a bit of a rebel, and I'm very curious, but I'm a journalist, right? So at this point, even through college, I was wanting to see and experience things. Columbia University, actually, in the year 1981, pays my way to Cuba. What? They paid my way to Cuba to cover a music festival, which I recorded on a big, how did I do this? I took a massive reel-to-reel 8-track, or not a, reel-to-reel, not 8-track, but, and I carried it with me to Havana and then to the music, whatever. So I had also been to Nicaragua because I went to cover the anniversary of the then quite wonderful Sandinista revolution, which has really become a horror. But back then it was really a fascinating people power movement. So I, this, many of you may not remember this, but it was a time again of around the question of immigration, a lot of tension. Central America, a lot of tension. There were American, who was it? Was it Susan Meiselas? There was, I can't remember if maybe I'm getting it wrong, but there were American citizens who were actually giving their American citizenship back because they were so horrified by the role that the US was playing in wars in Central America. But there was also there was fear. Fear is something that we know in our country, right? In this case, fear of journalists being kind of attacked and harassed, et cetera, et cetera. So my decision to become a citizen had a lot to do with the fact that I was like, God, you know what? I have been flying in and out and coming about and thinking like, oh my God, this is fabulous with a green card. And I just suddenly, something must have been Murrow who just said, think about this. Because I was like, you know what? One day they're just going to say, nope, not today. You can't come. And when I felt that, I was like, oh my God, that could happen. I'm getting my citizenship. So it was a little bit out of fear. But again, because we're here at Murrow College and because of everything that Edward R. Murrow stood for, I feel so seen in being honest about this kind of fear because that's what he lived with. That's what he lived with. And he and I couldn't be more different.
I watched In the Heights.
In the Heights, yes.
Yeah, and I saw you
So,
like an activist.
so some people may not know. So my dream was that I moved to New York to be an actor, really.
Yeah. So you have your play
My
there.
big moment was In the Heights. If you don't remember, go back. I led the protest scene. So my acting moment happened, yes.
And you actually was talking about nature affect many students here. Like, I can go to school, I can get a degree, and what I will do later after that. It was like other way to elevate your voice to show, the struggles of the youth immigrants.
So the way that happened is that Chiara Alegria Hudes, who wrote the original book for In the Heights on Broadway, and then, as she said, Lin-Manuel was just too busy to write the screenplay for In the Heights. So he was like, you write it. So she wrote the screenplay. And at that time, Chiara and I were writing books together, having a lot of creative kind of combustion that was happening. And all of a sudden, I just get this email. Would you consider having a role in the film In the Heights? And I'm like, is this real? What is this, April Fool's or what? And so I didn't have to audition. They just knew. And so it was really like an extraordinary experience to be on a major Hollywood set. And I will always love that film. And it did make a dream come true, which is why when I start my classes, because I'm a good Mexican, I have 16 jobs, including being a professor at Barnard College, my alma mater. I never say no to work. So on my first day of class with my students, and with some of the students today, I have asked them, what is your craziest, wildest dream? I need you to say it out loud. What is your craziest, wildest dream? Because when you say it out loud, it becomes more real. And so that was one of my craziest, wildest dreams, was to be in a Hollywood film. So we are, for those of you who have listened to Suave, which won the Pulitzer, don't tweet this out, but we are in the early stages of trying to bring that to a major feature film. So fingers crossed. So I will definitely have a cameo, but it's gonna be like somebody will be playing me, and I'm not gonna say who people have thought of, but. And Suave is, of course, he's already got all of his ideas of who's going to play him. And we kind of already have a decision. For those of you who know who Luis Guzman is, he was like, I want Luis Guzman to play me. And I was like, nope. And I love Luis Guzman. He's great. He's a great actor. But I was like, Suave, you are much more attractive than Luis Guzman. He's not going to like it when he hears that. But it's the truth.
Okay, we finished now. I had a lot of questions, but the audience and So that's how questions too. So
We do have a few students from the College of Murrow that's going to ask some questions that were submitted by our well-read Cougs.
Hi, so my name is Ms. Fira. I'm a senior in the multimedia journalism program. So I wanted to ask, do you believe that our country is being divided more and more, or are we trying to reduce the division, and what can we do to help that happen?
Great question. And by the way, Musfira is a brilliant journalist on her way. Keep your eyes on her. She's going to be running stuff. So that's a product of your work in your community and your state, because she's originally from the area of Seattle, Redmond, where her family runs the best halal restaurant possible. So
Thank you.
that was okay, right? She did not pay me to say that. So you all of us, we have a responsibility in this moment. We really do. And the responsibility is, what are we going to do about this division that has literally, you know this, it was not this way 15 years ago. We were dealing with other issues, by the way. I'm not saying it was all perfect, right? 9/11, that was the kind of the beginning of the major anti-immigrant push. But this, what we're seeing here, and for those of you, if you've never been to the border and seen the wall, let me tell you, it is horrific. It is horrific. We should be so ashamed. I've been to the wall in China, and even that wall is of a particular kind of architecture that was admirable. Still horrific for the symbol of dividing, right? Like you cannot cross, etc., borders. But the architecture, this wall is Darth Vader architecture. It is horrific. And they continue to make it more and more horrific. It wasn't bad enough to make a wall that's 15 feet. Under Donald Trump, they increased it to 30 feet because at 30 feet, that's where you develop vertigo. So are you able to get to there? The chances of you falling and therefore dying have increased. So all of us have the responsibility to talk honestly about what we have witnessed in our communities, right? Which is the opposite of the narrative that is being told. Your communities are experiencing the change, your state is experiencing the change like every place else. In fact, more multicultural change in the state of Washington because of your proximity to Asia, et cetera. There's a whole other thing that you're living with. But all of this is not to be feared. And it's not to be feared based on real life experiences that you have. So the more you talk about this with people around you, you're also part of the solution. So unfortunately, some days I feel very divided and upset about what's happening. But I'm also not giving up hope. I also know that the overwhelming majority of American people actually would like for this to be resolved, that they actually want some kind of path. When you ask them in the correct way, the response is, we would like to find a path. Like, this is untenable. The diehards of Build the Wall exist, but there's, even with what just happened in Baltimore, and I said this on the air on MSNBC, I couldn't believe it came out of my mouth, which is what happens when you do live television. You're just like, wait, did I just say that? Wait, what? Which is also very scary because you never know. But I said, there are people, Republicans, who will see this story and they will see beyond what they are being told. And they will see this story of these 6 men who are doing this thankless work. And they will say, oh, you know what? I don't know if I'm really buying this thing that they're all horrible and terrible and taking over. And like, I don't know. Like these guys, the pictures of them, right? The 6 men, like they look like the guys we should be afraid of, but actually why? They were building the bridge. So our country has been through these kinds of divisions in the past. So I am not going to give up hope, and I believe that you're part of the solution, 100%. but also all of us. Like, I really put it firmly back on you, on all of us, to break through and to have the conversations based on reality, not on what you're being told, but what is real, what we know, what is the data, right? And the data shows immigrants are not bringing in crime. There's less crime in their communities, and they are not a threat. They are not trying to hide. Again, if you go to the border, what you will see now is the immigrants who, during my time as a reporter, they would run from the Border Patrol because Border Patrol is scary. And they're not nice. Some of them, but overwhelmingly not necessarily. So they would run away. That's not happening now. They're not running. They're literally entregándose to the Border Patrol. They are giving themselves over to the Border Patrol. So there's no hiding. They're like, register me. Take my name and number. I'll let you know where I am. And if they were to ask for a contribution, they probably would say, and we'll send you a contribution as soon as we get a job, which will be momentarily. If you want us to send you a contribution, dear Border Patrol, we will. Like, that's the real narrative, not that we're coming and taking. I was on the border 3 weeks ago with 2 men who had done that thing, walking for 40 days, thirsty. They were the ones who crossed the border on the other side of the wall. Once they got to this side, they kneeled and started praying. That's what they did. They didn't run. They started praying and waited for the Border Patrol, which didn't come, by the way, because they're badly managed, the largest law enforcement agency in the country. They don't know what they're doing. And when these 2 men were brought to the little camp, which there now exists on U.S. territory, these little makeshift camps, like refugee camps, with no help from the United Nations at all, and Good Samaritans, guys who look just like our dear Bruce, poor guy, I've had to bring him up twice. The Good Samaritans, Bruce and his wife, who come from places like this or Maine and go and do frontline work on the border. And what they will tell you is that there's nothing to fear at all. There's nothing to fear from the people who are coming. So much so that in order to prove the point, I'm like, you know what? I want to go sleep outside on the border. I know my CEOs are not going to like that. But as a journalist, it's like, I feel like that's what Murrow would do. He's like, well, I'm going to put my life out there to show you that there's nothing to be afraid of. Because those 2 men, when the Good Samaritans offered them water and food, which they needed, they said, no, thank you. So don't tell me that we're takers and we're just coming to take everything. I have seen it over and over again. They'll be offered water and they'll be like, no, 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 gracias. No, it's okay. I have my own. You've been in the desert for 2 days. No, it's okay. Hungry? No, it's okay. So don't tell me that they're takers. So I believe that we will get over this, but it's going to be because of people like you and everybody in this audience and virtually. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alexandria. I'm also a senior getting or majoring in multimedia journalism. I was just wondering what your writing process looks like and if there's a difference between like journalistic writing and just author writing and or if there's any similarities.
The only similarity is that when you're sitting there with the blank page, you've just got to go. You can't, you just got to go. It's very different. So when I'm writing for radio or when I'm writing a pitch or when I'm writing some kind of commentary, it's very much like I have to make a point, I have to make a statement, and I've got a very limited amount of time and I have to write it within this, or when I'm writing a speech, like the one that I'm giving tomorrow, where it's just, I'm writing it with hand, right? By hand. I love it. And it's kind of like communicating a story to all of you. And that's very different than writing a book, which is incredibly painful and very scary, but also lovely, but a very different experience. And I'm really at the point now where I'm like, could I write another book? I kind of feel like I should. I'm beginning to feel the pangs. I have a little PTSD because it's a lot of work. But considering that I don't have to write 200,000 words, I'm like, you could do it in half the time. So I'm kind of like, and I'm figuring out what I have to say. And frankly, the reporting that I just did, both in Mexico covering the elections where a woman will be elected president in Mexico. So who's the more machista country? I'm just saying there is going to be a woman president in Mexico. So all those macho men are going to have to figure out how to do that. And we're in our country, we still haven't done that. So that reporting and the reporting that I just saw on the wall has made me feel like I need to write this particular moment. So yeah, and I'll look for the inspiration.Maybe it will come. Oh my God, it's going to come from here. My godfather's going to help me. Come on, Edward.
Do you have any questions for the audience, from the audience? Any questions? Well, I did mine, please.
I know our students have some more, so we wanted to.
Okay, go Cougs.
Do you have a question back there? No, come. There's no bad questions, right?
No bad questions, never.
You can talk from there.
Okay, cool. I'll use my loud voice.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Sarah Hawkins. I'm a professor here in the Edward R. Murrow College of Communications, and I teach public relations. So a little bit of a different thing. I really appreciate. I got to listen to your book, the audio. Thank you for reading it. It was great. Great plain listen.
Ooh.
Maybe screwed up a little too much. It's gonna cry next to it, but it was fine. I am teaching crystal range currently. We're in our second semester teaching it. And this might really talk to me a little bit about leveraging those strengths and like being fully okay to realize your niche and really come into it. I have it marked here though. Once I was the owning my voice chapter really kind of spoke to me in that with that imposter syndrome, but also knowing like you talk so fully about stepping into that entrepreneur on the whole. What was kind of that light bulb for you to realize that you kind of had to own who you were, and then also kind of like pivot and market it at the same time? So you say like I'm special, I'm.
So the first time that someone told me that I had a brand, I was honestly horrified. It was maybe 2002, post 9/11. The person who told me that is the chair of our board of directors, Deepa Donde. So she could see it before. She's a media person herself. She was able to see that before. I was like, that's gross, yuck. The moment of creating Futuro, I don't think at that point I understood the brand per se. But I had learned how to raise money, and that was key. What I didn't understand about raising money came a little bit later when someone said to me, no, people, donors, philanthropists, foundations, they'll fund a project, but they're really interested in funding a person. They want to fund you, Maria. And I was like, you think? And they were like, yeah. That was very important for me because then I was like, okay, but I'm not raising money for me. I'm raising money for Futuro Media, for Latino USA, for Suave, for all of these other projects. Now it's a very different story. I still, in terms of marketing my brand, I still think that we haven't, like Futuro has not. In the scheme of things, I don't think we really focus on the journalism. So it's not like, let's promote Maria as like a brand or anything like that. And I kind of love that because we're just still scrappy and we're just like all about the journalism. I mean, I'm just going to tell you because I believe in radical transparency. So right now, I'm doing a lot of videos. I'll take some video. Musfira is taking videos of things because I'm sending them to my personal production assistant, not paid by Futuro. Like I'm paying someone who I'm sending my little social media stuff and he's going to put it together. And I was telling my CEO, the co-CEO of Futuro Media, I was like, you know how silly this is, right? Like I'm paying for this. Like Futuro's not paying. I'm paying for it. And it's like, yeah, thankfully I'm able to do this now. It gives him work. He's looking for work. Um, I understand how there's value in that, but I still think that as a company, we're not like, oh my God, let's milk that. Let's milk the brand. Like, I'm not even, I should be much more present on TikTok. But we haven't really had the conversation of like, well, what are you gonna do on TikTok? I mean, I have a sense of what I do on Instagram, but really we need to be on TikTok. So I think it's an active conversation. And I think for journalists, it can sometimes be uncomfortable. But when you understand that what you stand for, right? That's why the fact that the alumni group wanted to read the book, it's not because they're like, ooh, she's got a great brand. It's because there's something beyond that, right? There's credibility. That's the thing that connects. And that's the thing that I still value. But if you have any ideas, I'll take free advice.
Thank you. Before we conclude, if you have not filled out a raffle ticket yet, please fill it out. We have some amazing prizes, including a signed hard copy of Once Once I Was You. But thank you, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Maria, for being here with us and everybody to joining here in this conversation about once I was you.
No, once you were me.
Yeah, once you were
Once
me.
I was you too.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're the same.
So we're the same. And I am inviting you to listen our interviews. We did some interviews this morning with Maria for NWPB in English and Spanish, of course. So it's a good opportunity to know more about her career as a journalist and how interesting it is for her to express her voice, and also enjoy the Mural Symposium. We have a lot of events and activities, so it will be great for everybody. So thank you.
Oh, wait, don't go anywhere. Wait, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to tell you to applaud on cue. Are you ready? All right, you can start applauding now. Okay, don't move, don't move. I'm going to take a selfie. Hold on. I know, I'm really, well, not with the branding, okay? Okay, don't move. Ready? All right, wave. Thank you.